Okay, so I guess I'll go ahead and get started. This is No-Nonsense, NoSQL, meant to be a nice alliteration to hopefully explain that it's a very introduction to NoSQL. If we haven't met yet, I'm Jen Strater. You can follow me on Twitter at Jen Strater. By day, I'm a senior consultant at Object Partners, a consulting firm in Minneapolis, Minnesota in the US. You may also know me as the co-founder of the organization Great Ladies. Okay. If you'd like to follow along, I have posted these slides to GitHub, and there should be a tweet going out with that as well. It has both the source for the slides and the examples I hope to use as well. So the agenda for this talk, like I said, going to start very, very introductory, some basic definitions, go over some types, some examples, and hopefully work up to, and you guys can watch me stumble through my example application. Kind of two different tactics, how you might use something like Mongo and an example of Redis. Okay. So first, what is NoSQL, or NoSQL if you pronounce it that way? It's come to mean not only SQL. Originally, it was kind of like a NoSQL, but not necessarily against the query language itself, but some of the ideas around relational databases. So I like to think of it as a group of data storage solutions that are just not relational data management systems. So there's two different ways that different NoSQL solutions go after this, either by making it schemaless and or non-relational. NoSQL solutions are usually in one of these four different types, either as a key value, document, column, or graph data solution. And some of the products out there do have some overlap between some of these different types. So the first type is a key value store. So this is a way of thinking about data. Very simple. You have a simple key and like a lookup. In this case, it can be used for lots of different examples. There are some different examples you may have heard of, things like memcached, DynamoDB, and the example I'm going to use, Redis. I do have an asterisk here because Redis is not only a key value store, it's a lot more than that. But in my example, I'm just using it as a key value. So some uses of key value stores can include things like caching, transient data. I've used or seen examples of Redis used to manage different sessions, and even just to store image locations. Some considerations to think about if you're looking at a key value store solution is that it is just a very simple lookup. So if you have relations between your data, that can be something to take into consideration. Transactions are also something else. So you don't have access to transactions like you would in a traditional relational database. And same thing with the querying. So there are lots of different libraries and plugins within the Groovy and Grails community that are pretty active. If you're looking at just Groovy, there's Jedis, which is more of a Java implementation, but you can pull it into Groovy. In Grails, there's a lot more, including Grails Redis, which is, and then Redis Gorm. So Gorm is a complete replacement of your domain model, whereas Grails Redis is what I'm actually going to use in my example, and that is just adding it at a partial stage. There are some older plugins for other options, including the DynamoDB Gorm and memcached. And like I said, and actually these are links if you're looking at them online. The second type I wanted to go over is a document store. So this is a little bit different way of thinking about it. Documents can have more of an embedded structure, and instead of thinking of in your traditional row and table, you have kind of what I very generically drew up on the in my example. So you have, and the other nice thing is that many of the document stores, or the ones I am familiar with anyway, have this idea that you can have optional fields. So in the one in the middle, you have first, last, and city. The one on the top has phone but no city, and those play nicely together. There are lots of examples in the in document stores, including CouchDB, RavenDB, which is not so much for Groovy, that's a .NET implementation. And even Microsoft has gotten into the document store with their hosted Azure Document DB. Like I said, I'm going to be using Mongo for my example. Okay. So some uses of some document stores may include some complete replacement in like a content management system or a blogging platform. I often use it with forms and fields when you have many optional fields. That way you're not replacing and creating all of those extra columns that you may or may not need. And especially, I've seen it or have used it as well in prototyping, especially when your schema is changing a lot. You don't have to necessarily do some schema migrations like you would with some relational databases. The considerations, though, of a document store is that a lot of them are full text searches, so searching can be difficult, as well as your transaction handling again. The main ones around, especially in this community, is the Mongo or MongoDB. So there's gmongo for Groovy, MongoDB Gorm, which is what I'm going to be using, and there is a CouchDB Grails plugin as well. Okay, I'm going to briefly go over kind of column databases. If you were here yesterday, Jeff Beck gave a talk on Cassandra, which is an example of a column database, and definitely probably one of the most popular ones. So there also is HBase and Hypertable, kind of as examples of some things that can be used as a column. So the use cases are very similar to kind of document stores. It's just different ways of how your data is set up and different ways to think about it. Okay. Whereas documents are kind of good for having this unstructured data, column stores are a little more difficult to deal with some of that stuff. Okay. The fourth type that I mentioned was graph databases. Okay, so this is a very different way of thinking about the way that data is related. So the applications are generally in things like social networks and in recommendations for e-commerce. So in this example, you see each of the circles is like a node. So you think about the data that's at a node, but it's about the relationships within the organization. And this isn't a great example of it because everything is connected together. But there are some great examples and resources if you want to do more research into graph databases they can get quite complex in the trees and the networking. Okay. The most popular example of a graph database is probably Neo4j. But there are some other options as well, depending on what you're looking at. So like I said, the uses are mostly based in social networks, getting those connections between everyone, and recommending, oh, this is something your friends have liked, or other people have bought similar things. So that's a great use case. The other is you can use it for location. So when you're connecting between different points, that can be graphed. Okay. So some considerations. I think it's a very different way of thinking. I haven't had too much exposure to graph databases, but it's definitely very different. And having the way that the tree structure is can make it cascading. I spelled that wrong. So the most popular ones, like I said, is Neo4j. There is a Groovy and a Grails option as far as libraries and plugins go. So if you, like I said, this is all online. I've got some resources here if you want to do research into any of these particular different types. Okay. So when you come to pick, how do you pick a database or data option when you're building an application? Do you replace everything? Do you replace part of it? Because if you're looking for just one, you don't have to. You can keep part of your relational database and substitute some of these other options in for things like caching or forms and different ways to distribute your system. Okay. So the example task I'd like to run through is from my organization, Great Ladies. If you haven't seen the examples, I've got lots of products that we have, or not necessarily products, but swag, the stickers, the coffee mugs, the t-shirts, and we get each of those different, or some of them from different vendors. So one thing that I'd like to do as my example is aggregate all of that data together and kind of create a little shopping cart application. So I've got this all set up on GitHub in different branches to go through a couple different approaches. So one is an all-in approach. You can completely replace the domain model with MongoDB Gorm plugin, and then the other is just to replace the shopping cart portion with the Grails Redis plugin. Okay. So how many people are familiar with NoSQL solutions like MongoDB? Okay. So MongoDB, for anyone that's not familiar, has some different terminology. So if you're used to relational structure, instead of, well, you have databases, but you have collections instead of tables and a document instead of a row. And I guess I could keep talking, but it's easier to show you what some of this stuff looks like. So we're going to try and get out of this, and you can watch me fumble through. Okay. So first we have, okay. So here is my very basic application, not a UI designer. This is the basic Grails scaffolding or like generated UI. So we have our list of products. I just have 3 that are bootstrapped in here. Of course, you can add anything you want to. I can go in and add, the stickers come in sheets, so I'm going to add those to the cart. You can see the cart, have links back to everything. I've got a total price in there. Okay, so the way that this looks and is set up in, so I've got it set up initially using the built-in H2 database for anyone who's been using this. So you see that I have a few different things set up relationally. I have the vendor, the different products, and let's, okay, so you see, I mean, very tabular, everything in here with the references to the vendor IDs, and everyone hopefully is familiar with this. Any questions? Okay. So the next step is going to be to check out the Mongo start branch. Okay, and look at this in IntelliJ. So the main thing to start is, so has anyone looked at, or had a chance to look at Grails 3 yet? A little bit? Okay, so this is the build Gradle file. So we have here the plugin added in, and that's all I have at this point. Built in running straight away, it's actually kind of nice. So the way that this is built, actually, sorry, this was what was crashing earlier. So we have no databases in here. This is just all the local configs for the running Mongo. And hopefully this will run. I was having some trouble with the Wi-Fi. This doesn't look like it's, yeah. Should be connected. Okay. So we have, out of the box, all of the bootstrapped domain objects immediately transfer over into Mongo. If we look at, let's see if I can make this bigger. Can you guys see that, or is that really tiny? Okay. Better? A little bit? Okay. I don't think this one works with zooming. Okay. So I will explain what's on the screen for anyone who can't see it. There are three JSON documents and with the different fields and their values. Everything right now is still relational. There are references to the IDs of the other domain. Same thing, so that was a reference to vendor, and here's the vendors. But it is kind of nice that it does work out of the box. That way you can transition things kind of and make them more, what's it, idiomatic for Mongo. Okay. So the next thing you would want to do is try to make it more like Mongo. So there's a few things to go in and do. The first thing is to try, we can embed some of, this didn't catch either. So I can embed the vendor into here. I will also want to update the bootstrap file So it's now in init. And rerun this. Okay, so I can check out the end branch and kind of show you what some of this might look like together. Okay, so what I ended up doing is to embed the vendor and the kind of a price and quality relationship into here. Okay, so I can drop this and completely restart this. And while that's running, I'll go through some more of this. So I also went into the cart and had the things embedded into there as well. The configuration has moved to a YAML file. Like I said, I didn't change anything except adding the plugin originally. So all of the config has defaults. The only thing I changed was to add a database name of products by changing the connection string. So MongoDB, use MongoDB and then local and then / the database name as the way to connect. Okay, let's see if this is running. This is really taking a really long time. Okay, what else did I do? Okay. We can look at some more of the code. While this is getting started. Any questions at this point? Anything about Mongo or other solutions that may not be clear? Yes?
I have a question. If you decide or you recently use Mongo as your primary database, should we have some special concern about some types, about serialization of some complex classes, or in order to persist in Mongo custom types, if you have to have some special consideration of specialization way?
Types as far as like, okay, so you've got like strings and numbers and types?
Yeah.
Or, okay. Yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, especially with the Gorm plugin's very developed and has a lot of the translations in there. I haven't used too many outside edges to know too much about this. This was just meant as a kind of a basic overview, and I'll get a chance to dig more into Mongo at the next opportunity. But yes.
I might be able to answer that question.
Yay. Yes.
There's a question around serializing and deserializing complex types, like POGOs or whatever the building is. So the Gorm does that for you. The underlying Java driver doesn't do that. It just serializes and deserializes primitive types. But the other libraries, like Gorm, like Morphia, like Strater, their whole purpose of being is to let you serialize and deserialize complex objects.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so we have this back up and running. Everything's running pretty much the same. So here, like I said, I changed the database name and got it down to pretty much a single, and I know you guys can't read this, but there's a single collection for products, and I have everything else embedded. The way that, and a nice thing about Mongo as well is that it only creates the structures when it's needed. So here I haven't added anything to the shopping cart yet, so there's no cart collection created. When I go in and add something to the cart, you see the cart's been updated to 1. I can update my Mongo, and now the cart exists and has all of its structures inside of it. Okay. Embedded. Okay. Right, and the other thing about Mongo is rather than by default you can use the number longs, but Mongo prefers to use the object IDs, which I added. So it's actually BSON, and a variant of JSON that Mongo is using. And one thing to notice as well is that you do have to add in the object ID, otherwise it's going to use the numbers by default. Okay. So the next example I kind of wanted to go over is to use Redis. So this was an example of how to switch everything out and using the Gorm plugin. But you can use partial in something like a key value store for Redis. No, I haven't done anything. Okay. Okay, so that should be updating. Okay, so our product went back to the beginning. Where's build? Gradle. Went in. There is a Grails Redis plugin. Just add it to your build file, and that should pretty much run automatically as well. There is no config setup. I haven't started using it yet. So the way to use the Grails Redis plugin is to inject it as a service, and I'll show kind of what we did with that. Okay, so I created this cart service to handle Redis instead of going through the domain model. And then if we look at the controllers, we take my product controller, and I'm injecting the cart service. Okay, so all you need to do is do Redis service, and then you can access most of the Redis commands directly. So in this case, a cart would be a list of items. It gets saved a little bit differently as far as the typing goes, but most of that gets handled in the plugins. So carts. So I want S members is to take all of the members of that particular thing. So I'm using just a name cart so I can keep them all separated. And then this colon notation with a session ID. So this is what I'm using as my key. And then I'm adding all of the products as I would to the cart into this key. So this is the Redis Desktop Manager. It's a visual tool for looking kind of at what's in Redis. Right now I have nothing in here, but let me go ahead and get this started and then go back to the code. Okay. Okay. Some pretty similar, yes, you can add, delete, and I've got several different ways of using this. Okay. Okay. While this is continuing to load, any questions? I know I really haven't touched on much. Redis is a little different for anyone who's not familiar. Yes?
How you implemented table mapping
Right. So I kept the cart object in here, but I'm not saving it or not persisting it. Just kind of, and there's a better way to do that. That's just in the or for the example. So we changed. Yeah, I had. Well, it's not in the Bootstrap file. But I changed essentially the way that all of the controllers were. So let's see. Credit save. Controller. Yeah, instead of just using like a list or a find, I ended up moving it into a service so I could access Reddit. I mean, you could do that here too, of course, but I don't know, like the service aspect of it. Okay, so we should hopefully have this back up and running. Okay, so from the beginning, the cart doesn't get created yet. If I go and add something to the cart, we do see that there's an item here. Reload it. By default, it goes to the first database 0. So we have here, so we see that I cart and then just for simplicity and examples, just pulling the session ID. So in here you see that there's only one member and it's just a reference to the price and quality relationship that I had set up for using the different products. Okay. If let's see, I'm gonna buy some t-shirts now. Add those and refresh this. And so now we have a set of things that are in here. Works pretty efficiently that way. There are different commands in Redis for depending on whether you're using a single string value or using it as a set, and there's lots of different data types too. Let's see. Okay, and the other thing that I had set up in here is the time to live. So especially with something like a shopping cart, you may want it to expire after, I think I'd set mine to 30 minutes or 1800 seconds. So you can set these to expire, and then at that point it will just remove it or be removed, and then it'll create you can create a new cart based on your session. Okay. Let's see, out of that, okay. Okay, yeah, so I've got the different things here. Oh, yeah, so there in Mongo, we had the optional fields here, and none of that was giving any issues. Any questions up through Redis? Okay. Right. Like I was saying, there are lots of different commands with Redis. And right, I have no Wi-Fi. But it is, yeah, so redis.io and has the list of all of them. So you usually have, like get would be, most of the simple commands are for regular strings. If you're using hashes, so then you have an hget, or sets are prefaced usually with an S. Let's see. What else was... I am running way early. Any questions about anything else in general in NoSQL? Anything want to go into more? Yes?
Are all Redis commands available to the Greach plugin?
Not all of them, and that's actually something that they're always updating. So as new versions of Redis come out, the Grails Redis plugin updates, and I know they recently updated it for Grails 3, which is how I'm implementing it here, and they added a few new commands, but I know that it's not the entire set, and it's all well documented on their GitHub and documentation.
The example that you show is per entry in the database or per database?
I'm sorry?
The expiration date that you show
Right.
is per entry in the database or is for the whole database?
It's set on the key. So there's a command expire that you can use.
The expiration value. When you enter something in the Redis database, you, instead of making like key value, you put key expiration date value.
Right. So I just pulled that up here. So it's using the Redis service, expire this key, and then in the certain number of seconds. Okay, so we can go through. Okay, I guess if there are no other questions, then we end. Yes?
How did you map that this card class is will be stored in Redis?
Mapping the cart?
Yeah. How did you map? How did you?
I didn't. So I was using it as a service instead. And I had to, so I went in my service and had to implement the get, the delete, and the adds instead of having the traditional domain model.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And it's just as an example of how to do it differently. So in Gorm, I mean, Gorm is our traditional, this is another option or way of going. Yes?
I have a question on the Mongo form. You embed some classes, let's say, and others to create the documents, but in many-to-many relationship, how do you manage the embed, or do you duplicate the content, or?
Right. So if we look at the products, so when on something like a vendor that carries across, so that is a risk. But for something like the way that the price is related to the quantity, so the more you buy, the cheaper the price gets. Something like that is specific to a document, so it makes more sense to embed it. Since you're not, I mean, you are getting that redundantly, but it's still, it's different for every document. And that's one of the things to think about in NoSQL in general, is that some of the NoSQL solutions, you are repeating data by having them embedded or linked that way. And it's something to consider when you're setting up your data and architecting your application.
The way you manage this duplicated data, I don't know, the classic author's books example, you embed the list of books in the author, okay?
Right, okay.
It's repeat inside our author the same book, and I update the book in Rails and save. Is search every instance of the book, or I don't know how the planning works.
Okay, so in your example, so that an author has embedded books, and there's a book that's in there more than once. It's usually, I mean, depending on the way that you have it, you'd have to have some sort of difference to make it in there twice. Is that what? trying to think of exactly what you're asking. Have it embedded. Okay, because so when you go to search, so you've got your Mongo. I didn't show a good example of querying. So in the DB, you start with the collection and you find based on. If you're doing something embedded, it's a full text search, so that's a little less efficient for something embedded. But it does return everything that match. It's kind of like a pattern. I mean, you can do it as pattern matching. But yeah, so if you're searching for something that's similar, it's going to return all of them. So if you have the same thing that's in there twice, and you search for the title of the book, for example, you would get both back. Is that what you're asking?
I'm asking about the updating.
Oh, updating them.
I have to update the book. It's
Um,
all this
It's been a while since I've used Mongo like that. I do believe, I'd have to look at it again. Okay, I think we started a little early as well. Okay, anything? Yes?
I have a question about, because I saw that there are many different plugins to work with Redis,
Correct. Okay, that I can go back to.
and I've used it. I mean, if there is any preference, or if there is several differences in one between, for example, the Redis and the Redis.
Right. So Jedis is the Java, just as a library. So if you're not in the context of Grails, you can use Jedis, whereas Grails, Redis is more of a wrapper around, like a Groovy wrapper around Jedis. And so this is what I was using, where you just inject it as a service. And then Gorm is just a full Gorm implementation of it. So there's different options depending on how invested in, or how much you want to get into it, and what functionality you want to have. Okay. Okay. This is starting to, yeah. Finished. Thanks.